Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. Question: have you noticed how everything has become about who and what is wrong? Not what's right, just who and what is wrong. People split on everything, always, and it's all that matters. The only position is opposition. And this is much more than trite. Just tell me what you're for. I'm not doing any kind of high-minded rhetoric. The President of the United States just signed an executive order bringing plastic straws back because lefties outlawed them in favor of paper to help the environment and marine life. An executive order from the President of the United States as one of his initial acts, right? He's just in there a couple of weeks with all the issues we have to deal with. Straws. Why? Because it doesn't matter what it is. As long as it allows you to own the other side, that's a win. More important than a win, it's a loss for them. A truly de minimis deliverable, if ever there were one. Make our straws plastic again. That's why you voted. You can see the mission creep that got us here. Party domination led to this battle to the bottom where, well, but they're worse, became enough. Holding your nose. How many of us vote for the lesser of two evils? Trump is often identified as the biggest purveyor of this poisonous dynamic. I see it differently. I see him more as a symptom of something bigger than him. After all, more people in this country decided that Trump, with all we know about him, approximated what made sense to them as normal more than Kamala Harris and the Democrats did. If that doesn't prove how far people are willing to go just to reject something, in that case, the radical left ideas, no matter what or who it means accepting. I mean, look at what keeps happening. Common sense is just swallowed up by convenience of partisan advantage. We can't agree on anything. I don't think we could get a constitutional amendment that the name of the country is America. You laugh, but it's not a joke. You don't think people on one side would say, America? You mean like Amerigo Vespucci? I bet you he was a pig. Trans athletes. We can't agree that trans female athletes shouldn't play against biological girls if they're obviously physically superior. And because we can't do that, we also can't agree that this is the last group of kids that we need to demonize. Not all trans athletes, trans girls, are guys my size looking for an easy route to a scholarship, you know. Tonight, you're going to talk to a doctor who deals with something called AIS. Google it. They're these kids that the other side doesn't want to talk about, with genetic conditions that make identity more tricky than just, I'm confused, or this is cool. But they don't want to talk about that because it makes it complicated and they want an easy win. And when I say that, even though I agree with the restriction, because I don't agree completely, the mere suggestion of anything less than complete capitulation, giving your head over to this side, you get savaged. Megyn Kelly, the mighty mouth, while supposedly setting an example of what is okay for her daughters to say and do, tells me to go bleep myself. That's the way you want your daughters to see and hear things? I guess so. And not just because it's what mama says to get paid, but it's what passes for tough political speech these days. That's passion. Go F yourself. Good use of the law degree. The ugliest antagonistic opposition possible. And the irony is, we agree on the restriction. That's how toxic it is. The desperation to play to advantage overwhelms everything. I get what Kelly's about. And guess what? I invited her on the show tonight for the first time. Of course, I knew she wasn't going to come on. Saying things about me is different than saying them to me, and I'm not punking her. I invited her on because I'm sure she does care about her daughter and who they play against and their safety and their opportunities. So do I with our two kids, our two daughters. And I wanted her to learn what else is at play with these kids from this doctor. Maybe she knows and she doesn't care. Maybe she doesn't. You know, I actually defended Kelly when she flamed out at NBC. I didn't like how happy people were when she got let go. I disagreed with what happened there, but I didn't think celebrating her failure was okay. And no, I don't expect her to treat me the same way. That's not what gets rewarded. That's the point. I'd still rather have a conversation with her in front of all of you to let you see what the actual disagreement is about and not about. So here's the latest on this. We have a full-blown bigot polling in the 80s to be put back into their job in a position of power just because people want the other side to lose. Even if it means supporting someone they likely don't agree with. People are against finding waste, fraud, and abuse because they don't like who's doing it. And the people who are doing it and have this great opportunity can truly get something done are now finding ways to do it that prioritizes hurting their opposition and what it stands for. That's why Musk picked USAID. Foreign aid reeks of the left in the current play of one against the other. It used to play the other way, but it doesn't matter. It's where we are. That's why they picked it. Most of you have never even heard of that agency. It's not even in the top list of anything like what our government spends. It was because of that and because they're investigating him. That's why. The agenda is so clear. With all the waste, fraud, and abuse that they could root out, they want to go after a place and talk about money that goes to media companies for subscriptions. Why? Because they see those as lefties. That's attacking the other side. And look, it's fine with me. You don't want tax dollars to go to pay for media outlets, subscriptions, or whatever. Okay, it's a political decision. But tell me this. If it's not just about owning the other side, naked opposition, then how do you justify saying no government money should go to the media, but then the same people say Trump wants to start a sovereign wealth fund with government money that may buy TikTok? That's not government money supporting the media? The hypocrisy is always so obvious because they don't care. The goal is equally obvious. Be against the other side. Look at this with this Musk employee. Deleted account on social media, had all these ugly, bigoted beliefs. He's a real one, okay? This is not a stretch. Don't marry outside your own race, inspire animus toward Indian people, bragging about being a racist. He's a real one. This story should bring shame on Musk for not vetting his own people in the same way that he wasn't vetted and then wound up going after an agency that's investigating him. And now he won't talk about that. Come on. And because he can't lose, right? He can't say, ooh, I had a racist inside the Treasury looking at classified information. Well, that wasn't good. Can't do that. You lose, right? So he's got to attack. So this guy who puts himself out there as the savior of the First Amendment, right? He goes after the journalist who reports on the story about his employee. He goes after the reporter at the Wall Street Journal saying she should be fired. Mr. First Amendment. Why? Because she's mean. No, if you want to take exception to the reporting, you should say, hey, this reporter used to work at USAID. Why didn't she or the Wall Street Journal think she should disclose that? Even though she was reporting on Doge, you don't think this was going to come up? That's as dumb as thinking that the bigot wasn't going to get exposed. You see, they don't care how they do what they do. It's just about getting the other side. And then the Vice President of the United States gets involved and defends the racist who has targeted people that are the same ethnicity as his wife and kids, Indians. Now, he makes a point that I think is good. I just don't know if it's genuine. Hold. He says, I don't think that doing something stupid on social media should ruin a kid's life. I don't know that this qualifies as stupid on social media, like posting a bad picture or a prank or something. The guy's a bigot and he thinks something's wrong with your wife and your kids. Okay? I like the compassion, don't get me wrong, but I'm wondering if it's an article of convenience because I've seen Vance not be compassionate to other people who don't line up with his side of the agenda battle. You see what I'm saying? And then Trump hears that Vance had said maybe the employee with the racist online activity should be back at Doge, and he goes, well, then maybe we'll keep him. I kid you not. Listen.
One of the Doge engineers was fired for some inappropriate posts. The vice president says, bring him back. What do you say?
Well, I don't know about the particular thing, but if the vice president said that, did you say that? I'm with the vice president.
Inappropriate is calling Fox the home team. Inappropriate is calling Ducey, that reporter, a plant and a simp. That's inappropriate. You shouldn't do that. Treat the colleagues with respect. He used that word because he didn't want to clue Trump into the idea that the guy's a racist, so it would be easier for Trump to say, yeah, I'm with my team. Do you see the game? You see? All of the extremism, it was brought into focus with one exchange for me. The only level-minded person in this whole dynamic I'm telling you about is this representative from California, Ro Khanna. A Democrat, but he's a fair broker. That's why you see him on outlets from left to right. And even here, the land of the reasonable. He asks Vance, hey, can you have the racist kid apologize for saying that Indians should be targeted with hate more just for the safety of kids like mine and yours, Mr. Vance? And even this idea got assaulted. Why? Because he's on the other side. Even though you know you agree with what he just said. It's not inappropriate. The guy's a bigot. See the game. The change isn't going to come top down. I wish. It's not. It's going to be people like you seeing what's going on and refusing to be a part of it. Now let's talk about this dynamic and why it is that the left sees that they have high ground. Brian Tyler Cohen, progressive YouTuber, friend of show, posted a tweet about this today in response to Vance's call to rehire the DOJ employee. He wrote, the husband of an Indian-American wife and the father of 3 Indian-American kids wants to bring back the staffer who posted normalize Indian hate. Brian joins me now. It's good to see you, young man. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Chris.
So here's the counter. Yes, he has to defend him because you and your brothers and sisters, or whatever they call themselves, want to cancel everyone who says anything you don't like. It's not enough to disagree. It's not enough for them to have to apologize. God forbid anybody apologize because you kill them with that. But you want to cancel them. And that's what you guys are about. And it's out of step with the compassion of the American psyche. And people are against you on it. And that's why Vance has taken the other side.
I mean, think about what that looks like in practice here, this desperation to push back on cancel culture, right? Thanks to Vance now, you have this DOJ employee whose stated position is that Indians should feel hated in America. He's going to be rehired, and then Vance gets to go home to his Indian-American wife and his Indian-American kids and look them in the eyes and say that a guy who wants you to feel uncomfortable in your own country now has a top job again in the government thanks to me. Like, Vance had a chance to defend his own family, and he opted instead to defend the Indian-hating bigot instead. Like, Chris, where are the balls on these Republican men? Trump calls Ted Cruz's wife ugly. Ted Cruz becomes Trump's best friend. Elon wants the Doge kid who hates Indians back, and Vance does his bidding while his Indian wife and kids are at home. Like, do they castrate these guys at the door of the RNC?
They have to pick a side, Brian, because this is what you guys do. Look, I see it. I think you got high ground here because this guy is a real one. He is a bigot. And I guess Vance, because he's married to an Indian woman and his kids are half Indian, he has portfolio to say, I can treat this guy any way I want because I'm the one being affected by his hate, not you. Okay, but I see the same thing in you guys, how you're assessing the executive orders. Everything Trump wants to do has to be illegal and wrong. Waste, fraud, and abuse. Everything Musk is doing has to be wrong. And I feel like you guys get stuck, not so much with the racist kid. I think you're on the right side of that one. But these 80-20 issues, trans females in sports, whether you should stand for the anthem, things where like most people are like, yeah, you should do that. You guys take the 20 side because Trump's on the 80 side. And I see that was the waste, fraud, and abuse. And I see it as an extension of the same toxic dynamic, if not as ugly an example.
Look, I think that you'll be hard pressed to find Democrats who say if there's legitimate fraud that we have to somehow keep it just because of stasis. But what Elon is doing here is not really doing that. I mean, by taking away USAID, which again, the reason he did it is clear. It's because they were investigating him. I mean, this is just over 0.5% of the budget. It does things like delivers clean water and offers HIV prevention across the world. Not only are those good unto themselves, again, for a fraction of the budget, but they confer goodwill to America across the entire planet. And then that means that when there's global conflicts, we have that goodwill to bank on. When we cede that ground, that gives an opening to countries like China. And so you would think that it's in America's best interest to keep USAID intact. And yet that's not what we're doing. We're instead ceding that ground to China, and that's bad for America, but it's good for one person. And that's Elon Musk, who has business interests in Beijing, who has business interests in Shanghai. And that's just one example, the USAID thing. We're seeing countless examples
it's the right one.
Where there are institutions that benefit.
Look, of course, a lot of the agencies do good things, Brian, but let's stick with the instant example because it's what we're living right now. Look, my beef, it's not my beef. My challenge is this. They can't get rid of the agency. Congress has to be involved in that. So there's going to be a litigation. That part's going to be on hold. The Democrats seem as though you are completely oppositional to any efforts to do anything. Why not instead Ro Khanna it and say, hey, look, these lists of things that you said in the subscriptions, Republicans and Democrats got those subscriptions from Politico. But if you want them out, that's fine. Let's see what else we can get rid of. We're here for it. You guys don't own waste, fraud, and abuse. We want it gone but no, you oppose it every step of the way. I haven't heard a single Democrat say anything good other than the yeah, but. Yeah, we're against it, but. And then you're against everything they're doing to get rid of it.
I think that if you really want to show Americans that you're legit about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, then go to the agency, for example, that's failed, the last 8 or 9 audits, and that's the military. But they won't touch the things that are obvious, that are the obvious 100%. Targets. Instead, when you go after USAID, the agency that is investigating Elon Musk, it shows that you're not serious about this, that this is just a way for Elon to pretend that he's going after waste, fraud, and abuse, but instead protect himself, protect his own interests, protect his business interests in China. So if you want to go at it in a legitimate manner. Go at it in a way that can bring both sides together. Look, Trump has a golden opportunity right now because he did win so many more votes than Democrats have won in the past. He was the first Republican to win the popular vote since I can remember. Since the Bush days, God knows how many years ago. And yet, what is he doing with his political capital? He's squandering it because he's not using it to go after legitimate waste, fraud, and abuse. He's not going after the obvious agency, the agency where by the way, he could gather bipartisan, bipartisan support. And he's not doing that.
That argument should have been made sooner because guess who's hearing it now? The man in the red tie with the blue suit. He just said, I think tonight, Dusty will correct me if I'm wrong, but he hears people saying, why aren't you going after DOD? USAID is not on any watchdog list for high alert, waste, fraud, mismanagement, all the stuff they measure, CBO, all these different other NGOs. And he heard it. And he said, next is DOD. I'm just saying there is an opportunity here for someone to break away from I got to own these guys. Everything they do has to be wrong. I got to prove they're the worst 24/7 and show that there are better ideas and that there's a way to do what wants to be accomplished in a better way. That's all I'm saying, Brian. I hear you do it on the pod all the time. I just feel like the coin of the realm is saying that Musk sucks, Trump is an idiot, all of his people are dirty, they're all misogynists. And I feel like that argument has been weighed and measured and you lost. Why not do something else?
Again, the ball is in their court. They're the ones that have power. If they want to actually make good on some of their promises that, by the way, will have bipartisan support. Look, if they go after the DOD and there is legitimate waste, fraud, and abuse that they can root out, what am I going to come on and say, no, we have to keep waste, fraud, and abuse intact just because Republicans don't want it? And so I have to be on the position. That's what I'm hearing from AOC. No, of course not. Of course I'm not going to take that position. But so far, until they give me any reason to believe otherwise, it's hard to make the case when the villains that they're propping up are the agency responsible for, again, half of 1% of the budget that delivers HIV prevention and clean water.
Well, it's 3 weeks in, and I think they've made missteps, of course. That's inevitable for anyone, let alone for Trump. And I think Musk was a big mistake, not vetting him, and Musk not vetting his guys, and the purveyor of the First Amendment going after a reporter for doing her job. This is all a bad look, but there's opportunity in that. I don't think the opportunity is to say this is a bad look. I think it's to show a better look. Just because you're not in power, then you guys should all resign your seats in Congress, right? No, you're still there. Come up with ideas. Try to make it about something more than just they suck. And I hear you do it all the time. That's why I wanted you on here tonight, and I appreciate you doing it, and we'll do it again. Brian Tyler Cohen, all over
Thanks, Chris.
YouTube. Huge presence, dwarfs my podcast. And I hate it. It's good to see you. 4 minutes and 5
Good to
seconds.
see you
Coming
too.
up, Trump ran on the economy. Okay, now let's start talking about what matters, okay? He wants to literally rolling up my sleeves. Why? Because you've got to pay for tax cuts, okay? The man who wrote the book on Trumponomics says, Cuomo, I've been trying to teach you differently for years. Well, I still don't get it. So let's talk about why Trump's tax plan is or is not better for America. All right, so we all remember this election, right? I know it's gotten confusing now because we're talking about plastic straws and trans, like these are the main issues. No. Main issues were the price of eggs, gas, insurance, having any semblance of living a dream of opportunity, and to the extent that we are collectively unsafe, you got to get the border in check and you shouldn't have slept on it and pretended it wasn't a problem. That was it, right? Some of the border stuff's going on. What about the economy? This weekend, House Republicans say they're hunkering down to finalize the one big, beautiful bill. I wonder whose words those are. That will include tax cuts, budget cuts, and increased funding for border security. Now, I am told that this is not about cuts, the Trump White House. They're doing it again. This is what happened in 2016. This is what caused the rift with Paul Ryan. Remember him? A real conservative? That Trump did not want to cut spending because people like the gifts, right? But he wanted the tax cut. And that's why one of the reasons he wound up being in epic deficit territory. Now, people disagree. People will say that this is the way to go, making those tax cuts permanent, and that this will grow the economy in a way that will be good for everybody. Now, one of the people who does that is the guest on my show right now. He is actually the author of, he is literally the guy who wrote the book about Trump's economic plan. That's Stephen Moore. And Trumponomics is the book, and the man joins me now. It's good to see you, my friend.
You too, Chris. And I was listening to your previous conversation, and I find myself, I don't know, agreeing with 50 to 60% of what you said. So that's pretty amazing. And you're right. Look, if we're going to try and waste in the budget, we should look everywhere. And the Pentagon, as you're right about this, it's the biggest bureaucracy in the world. It's an $800 billion budget. I'm for a strong national defense, but my God, you could probably cut $100 billion out of the Pentagon and nobody would miss it. But why is it that when we find waste in some of these other programs, you know, people go crazy like it's going to be Armageddon? And so I want an efficient delivery, pro-delivery, pro-growth agenda. And I think that what Trump's talking about on the DOGE is good. Now, on the tax cuts, look, this worked. I mean, we did it. We had the experiment. I'm proud to have been one of the authors of that tax bill. We cut our business tax rate so we could be more competitive. We saved the average family $3,000 a year on their taxes. We made the businesses more competitive. And guess what? We got more growth. We got more revenue than ever before. So I guess I flip it back to you and ask, why wouldn't we want to extend this when it's a project that's working?
For the same reasons that the real fiscal conservatives didn't like it at the time, that you guys didn't offset it with spending cuts that cost Paul Ryan his position. And the CBO and the Taxpayer Institute say they did not pay for themselves and that you are adding in all the padding of the pandemic into the economy to make up the shortfall because they didn't pay for themselves. You have to cut spending if you're going to cut revenue. Trickle down does not work. And the reason people had money is because this government was dumping it on them 2 administrations in a row. That's why they had it. And it could add to inflation, as you know. So why won't you just cut spending?
Well, first of all, you're probably talking to the person in Washington who wants to cut spending more than anyone else. So I certainly want to cut spending, and I think we could easily go back to pre-COVID era spending, and we would be able to balance the budget. But there's really 2 issues here. What are we going to do on the budget to cut the spending? And look, I think DOGE is a very good start with that. There are probably hundreds and hundreds of programs we could get rid of. My God, a few days ago,
Stephen, just for everybody at home, everybody says waste, fraud, and abuse will help make it up. It never does. So let's hope I'm wrong this time and it happens. You got to cut spending. That's what Republicans say they're going to do. Why isn't he out there saying it?
Okay, but Chris, with all due respect, you're being a little hypocritical. I mean, you've got a program that we know is a complete waste of money for the last 40 years, and that's USAID. There's no evidence whatsoever after spending billions and billions of dollars that has caused any development in these countries.
Well, that's not what Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, says.
So it's just one example. That's not what the Secretary
of State says. That's not what the Secretary of State says. He says USAID is fundamental soft power that the United States needs.
Well, he's wrong. I mean, the fact is that these programs have not made people in Africa are just as poor today as before we spent all this money. But the point I'm making is we just did a study at our group Unleash Prosperity. It was just a poll question. How much of every dollar in Washington do you think is wasted? And the average, and these were Democrats, Republicans, Independent, 37 cents out of every dollar. So, yeah, we need a wholesale microscope on these programs to find how we can find waste.
What a waste of money that poll was. What a waste of money that poll was. What do you care what voters think the percentages of waste in government? You should know the actual number. And then there are all kinds of reports. Go agency by agency and strip it out. But you still have to cut spending. You can't lard on spending for people and give out big contracts to the corporate oligarchs and pals and then think everything's okay because you're rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse.
Look, I want to cut programs across the board. I want to find areas where, for example, in Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, where the government's own auditors say that we've spent $250 billion on fraudulent payments. Those are things that nobody ever does anything about, and I think that Trump will. But I want to go back to a point that you made earlier about whether the tax cuts paid for themselves. And we can argue until the cows come home about whether that happened, but I can tell you the real numbers. It's the Taxpayer
Institute and the CBO.
I don't care what anybody's saying. I'm just going to give you the numbers. The revenues that came in last year were higher with the tax cut than the CBO and all these other people said we didn't cut taxes at all. It's true.
Because of the pandemic money, Stephen. You're ignoring the biggest infusion of cash to the American taxpayer since the New Deal. Between you guys and Biden, all of the checks,
I don't even understand what you're saying.
All of the money.
The revenue, look at that chart. Look at all the revenues that came in because we lowered the corporate tax rate and we brought about $2 trillion from the rest of the world in the United States, and that generated tax revenues.
If this were the campaign, this is what would be said. You're taking credit for Biden's economy?
No,
really?
Hardly. I mean, Biden is the one.
Really? Did you just see the graph?
The massive inflation.
Did you see the graph? Did you see the graph? The graph. That's on Biden's watch. What happened to the buck stops here?
That's right. Look at how the corporate tax revenues went up as the tax rates went down. That's called the Laffer curve, Chris.
But it's the recovery from the pandemic. The laugher is that you're making it sound like this is just because of your tax cuts.
Because what happened is you get more investment, as we did from those tax cuts, as businesses invested
they bought
more,
back their
you
stock.
get the payoff in those years.
They didn't give people, hold on a second, Stephen. They bought back their stocks, okay? They did not give people wage increases. They cut labor. Come on, they didn't pass it on to the little guy. They passed it on to themselves. I see guys with new boats and 3 Porsches. That's not what it's supposed to be about.
No,
it's how they spend it. But look, we keep talking about it when they lay it out, Stephen. Yeah, come back Monday after they lay it out, and we'll keep talking about it. Yeah. I love having the conversation with you. We don't have to
one last
agree,
thing.
But
if they don't pass this tax cut, the average family in America is going to pay $3,000 a year more in taxes. Are you in favor of that, Chris?
No, but I don't know that that's true. Okay? I don't know that that's true. Let's see what they lay out, and I'll bring you on to discuss it. You're always welcome. Always welcome. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the game. Stephen Moore, thank you. Absolutely. You don't have to agree. You can disagree. You don't have to be disagreeable, and it doesn't make you weak. You learn things when you hear the competing ideas, not when he says, I'm an idiot, and I say, oh, yeah, look in the mirror. Stupid. It's got to stop. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Trump's pick for a special U.S. envoy for hostage affairs was supposed to be on the show this week, but then when Trump said that he was going to make the Gaza Riviera, he got called into an emergency meeting. So what is the reality of how America is going to get their people back, and what role should we have in peace in the Middle East? Next.
Gaza Strip and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it. I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East.
So we were supposed to have Trump's nominee for Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs, Adam Boehler, on right after that. But after the president said that, we were told he had to go into an emergency meeting. Now, his schedule cleared up. He can come on so we can talk about the state of play with the hostages and where we should be positioned in that part of the world. Adam Boehler joins us now. Good luck in getting the position and going forward.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I'm sorry I had to disappoint you on Wednesday. I had to work on things like hostages.
Hold on a second. You're trying to tell me that the meeting that you had to go into was in no way caused by what President Trump said next to Bibi Netanyahu? It just happened to be an emergency at the same time?
Well, I've got hostages all over the world. And the reality when you have an event like that is it takes up a lot of your time. So you have a lot of excess work. But I've been very happy to talk about what the president said because I was very supportive and happy about it.
You're supportive and happy about the United States taking an ownership position in Gaza and trying to mastermind the reconstruction, even if it means having Gazans not return to their homes?
I'm supportive that he came up with something. And you said it earlier on the show. It's so easy to say no and have no solutions. And everyone just says no and doesn't look at the reality. And at least he put something forward and something that people can respond to. And I really appreciate that. It's why I work for the man. It's why he was elected.
How do you think we get the hostages home?
I think we continue to apply maximum pressure on Hamas. I think we've done a decent job so far. And I think we've got to prioritize. I assume you're talking about the hostages in Gaza, not other places.
Yes.
But specific to Gaza, I think we continue the path and we apply maximum pressure.
The reason that, the surprise to many, if not to you, of what he said to Bibi Netanyahu, including to Bibi, is that the Arab community didn't like it. You don't know how Hamas will respond to it and if there will be antagonism that they'll direct towards the hostage negotiations. Have you seen any indication of that? Are you worried about that?
Well, what I hear is they're going forward on the release, which is important. I care about that, so you'll see that tomorrow. And in my mind, this is how I evaluate things. Did it strengthen our hand or did it weaken our hand? And I have to sit with the families after, and I have to have that discussion. And in my opinion, going forward, proposing a solution and not showing weakness only strengthens our hand. And that's what I'm hearing from the Israelis. I'm hearing we didn't lose ground. I'm hearing, if anything, things continue. And at least now there's something to respond to. And so Arab countries don't like it, but what are we supposed to do? He's not ignoring the reality. You've got all these people coming to Gaza, and there's nothing there. So what's their answer?
I totally get it. It should be on them. But the surprising part is that and of course, Levitt, walked it back. But the idea that we would put boots on the ground or pay for what's happening in Gaza, as any kind of lead position was shocking. But she pushed that back, and we'll see how the Arabs respond to it. You're right. We'll see what they do. Let me ask you something quick before I let you go, and I appreciate you. You got an invitation to come whenever there needs to be messaging about hostages anywhere in the world. You've got a platform here. Call away. Ksenia Karelina, we've been watching her case, wrongly detained in Russia. The whole story. Is there any hope?
Absolutely. I think we need to engage in dialogue with Russia, but the United States has to change its stance, and that's what the president is doing. These things aren't okay. I want people to know it's not okay to retain American citizens anywhere in the world. And it's not going to be, if you're doing that, it's going to be a real problem. And the president has made that very clear. And I think the case is the same here. We're not going to ignore it. We're not going to ignore her being held. We care a lot. I've got 3 Americans there right now that are wrongfully detained. I want them all out. And I'm not going to stop till they're out.
I appreciate the aggression. I'm here if I can help in any way. Mr. Boehler, again, good luck
I really appreciate
getting the job, and good luck doing it. Take care, Adam Boehler.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, I want to bring in Ksenia Carolina's boyfriend. You've seen him here before, Chris Van Heerden. He's been fighting. You got to advocate for yourself in these situations. They got a lot of different people in the mix. It's good to see you, brother. That is good to hear. It's the first time I've heard the administration speak openly about your love. What do you know about her, and what do you make of the new administration?
Chris, so good to be back here with you. 6 weeks ago, she was going through a lot of negativity because she was actually being moved to prison. She's in a prison right now. No more being in a detention center. She's in an actual prison in Russia. So very negative, a lot of emotions. She believes she's never coming home, at least not for 12 years. And I'm trying my best to just keep her positive and keep her hopes up high. Let me tell you, in the last 2-3 weeks under the Trump administration, I was informed, I was promised that President Trump is up to date about Ksenia. He's been informed about her, as was Secretary of State Rubio, and who was just on the show, Adam was as well very up to date about Ksenia, very much up to date about Ksenia. And I'll tell you what, I have not been this optimistic about getting Ksenia home in a long time. And I put my faith in President Trump and Adam. I have to say, Ksenia was finally being declared wrongfully detained very late last year. And yes, the Biden administration did that, and I'm very grateful. But they've done nothing. I waited till the very last day under the Biden administration for something to happen. And they just told me to keep quiet. And I don't know. They say keep your mouth shut. So under the Trump administration, I feel confident.
So, as always, I'll never ask you to do anything that I'm not positive is in the best interest of the situation. But anytime you think you need the opportunity to speak, you got my cell phone number. You call, you're on that night. And hopefully, I can't wait to see you and your love reunited and back here at home. I cannot wait, Chris, and we'll do anything we can to help.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.
All right, brother, be well. You know how to get me. 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Up next. Now, the reason I wanted to have Megyn Kelly on was not just because I'm self-loathing and I like to hear myself being insulted, but because there's a part of the reality when it comes to trans life that we're ignoring. And we're ignoring it out of convenience. It's easy to say, yeah, there are these guys who are confused and mentally ill and disturbed, and they're deciding to just take the easy route by playing against girls. There is a genetic abnormality at play with some people that is part of the trans story that you need to understand, because not everybody is the same. Pun intended. I have a doctor who has studied it, it's science, and she'll explain it. Next. You can be against trans female athletes playing against high school girls when they have an obvious physical advantage and realize that this is not just some group of fakers or that they're all messed up in the head and there is no medical explanation for any of this, because it's not true. Now, scroll up. Let's get to Dr. Eileen Wong. I wanted to bring in a doctor who can explain something called AIS, okay? And the doctor is a urologist and an intersex specialist. And she's not here to tell you about how people feel. This is science. And of how to, we don't know. It could be thousands of kids are born in a way that they may look one way, but genetically are something different. Doctor, thank you on short notice for coming in. What is AIS? Science related.
No problem. Thanks so much for having us. So AIS stands for Androgen Insensitivity Syndrome, and which is one of many different biological conditions that people are born with, where they have male or female characteristics don't fall on the standard spectrum of male or female. So androgen sensitivity syndrome in specific is a condition where a child is born with XY chromosomes, but there is a genetic mutation in what's called their androgen receptor. Basically, they're testosterone deaf. So these kids are born, and fetuses, as you may remember from high school biology, start off as female. But at a certain point, people with Y chromosomes, which have a certain gene, they split off into a little bypass and become male. They differentiate into male. But in these kids, their cells don't respond to that testosterone. And so they continue down the normal pathway, even though they are XY. And so they're born. And when they come out, they look phenotypically to the naked eye female. They don't have penises. They have small neovaginas, essentially, right? But inside, they don't have uteruses, and they have they have internal testes or internal gonads. But typically, they grew up thinking that they are female because their brains essentially didn't respond to testosterone and didn't have that sort of conditioning.
So, Dr. Wong, the pushback is, okay, fine. There are one or two of these per gazillion people. That's not what trans is about. Most of them are just people who make a choice. You say no, there's a whole family of these genetic based what disorders, if you want to call them, and that has to be taken into consideration. How so?
So we like to think of them as differences because, as a scientist, you realize when you look at the spectrum of humanity that there's a wide range of variations of sex differentiation. Androgen insensitivity syndrome has been thought to be as common as 1 in 20,000. And there are other forms of intersex that fall under that umbrella, like adrenal conditions, other things that if anyone's ever read the book by Jeffrey Gennedy's Middlesex, there are other genetic conditions where things aren't necessarily clear. There are even people who have something called mixed gonadal dysgenesis, where they actually are sort of mosaic, just like a cat that has spots of different color fur. They have different sets of genes within their body. So some people are actually born with both a testis and an ovary. And so people don't fall neatly into these definitions at all. Sex is a spectrum, and we have genetic, scientific evidence of this.
Dr. Wong, I appreciate you. Thank you for the explanation. The conversation will continue. I'm sure it's not going away as a political issue. So thank you very much for putting some science to it. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. So what I wanted to do there was make it very clear that it's not all just one way, okay? You can't look at the trans community and say either you're a boy or a girl. What if this is your kid? And that's how they were born, and it's not that clear a call. Oh, there's only one or two of them. Well, what if there isn't? Why can't you be compassionate and see that there's a need to be reasonable also? You can have your restriction about sports, but it doesn't mean you have to condemn a whole class of kids. That's my point. We'll be right back.